Hello, everyone. Good morning and good evening. Welcome at the Consortium of Indo-Pacific Researchers. I'm Indu Saxena, the Chief of Operation Officer and a Senior Fellow at the Consortium. Today's discussion is focused on India elections 2024, analyzing the geopolitical dynamics in South Asia. As we know, the first phase of Indian parliamentary election, which involves 543 seats, started on April 19, and the voting process has been taking place over 7 phases, and we have this last phase remaining on June 1st, and the result will be announced on June 4th. It is a very crucial election for the India and the region itself. We have, on the one side, we have Viksit Bharat aspiration and ambition for 2047, when India will be celebrating its 100 years of independence. India envisions transforming itself in a developed country and a major global power by 2047. On the other side, in domestic arena, there are some party politics and the conversing, like the dynastic politics and regional politics, regionalism, caste, and religion politics that is coming up with this Viksit Bharat aspiration. It is important to acknowledge the multifaceted nature of India's elections and the various factors that influence the elections. And as we know, the biggest country, the largest country in the South Asia is have that much economy and the largest population in the world. We see having the 965 million registered voters is playing a crucial role for the country, for the region, and for the world too. So looking at the 3 dimensions of national, regional, and international, we will discuss this India's election and what are the challenges and opportunities for India and the global tumultuous period. We have star panelists here. Before I introducing them, let me announce that views presented here are personal, should not be constituted to any organizations and affiliations. We are pleased to have Dr. Hayat Alvi. She is Associate Professor at Naval War College, USA. She specializes in international relations, political economy, and comparative politics with regional expertise in the Middle East, North Africa, and South Asia. She also specializes in Islamic studies and genocide studies. Warm welcome, Dr. Alvi. We have the honor to have former Ambassador Anil Tribunat. He is a well-known expert on India's foreign policy. He served in Jordan, Libya, and Malta. He's also a distinguished fellow and head of the West Asia Experts Group at the Vivekananda International Foundation, a prominent research think tank in India. He's a regular commentator and contribution on foreign policy issues. Our third star panelist is Dr. Sania Abdullah Close. Dr. Close is a political scientist working on non-proliferation and regional security issues for over a decade. Her research articles are published in refereed journals. We have esteemed Dr. Muhammad Jahidul Islam Khan from Dhaka. He has joined from Dhaka, and he is a traveling scholar and academic visitor at Reading University, UK. He's a registrar. He serves as a registrar in American International University, Bangladesh, Dhaka. He has written various book chapters, 2 books, and research articles. So our panelists are well known, and they have been frequently talking about these South Asian regional dynamics, Indo-Pacific, India-China competition. Just to kickstart this discussion, I would like to mention some to start with this, there's a brief, taking a brief comment on the first question. Looking at the national narrative mixed with the regional politics that fueled the Indian election campaigning of this 19th Lok Sabha, how do you see the next 5 years in Indian politics nationally and regionally? I guess we should start with Dr. Alvi. Dr. Alvi, over to you, please.
Sorry. Thank you very much. The question has a lot of complexities, and this is an election that cannot be overemphasized in terms of the importance and gravity and magnitude, both domestically for India as well as regionally, and even internationally in terms of what India's role can be or might be in geopolitics, particularly with regard to United States context of great power competition and countering China in the South Asia region, particularly the Indian Ocean region, and trying to garner partnership with India and the United States to counter China, particularly regarding the Belt and Road Initiative of China, the BRI. So at geopolitical level, there's a lot at stake from the US perspective in terms of what any future administration or the continual administration of Modi and BJP might be doing in terms of a US partnership to counter China. In terms of military to military relationship between US and India, that's ongoing. There are exercises, there's security cooperation that's ongoing. But as you know, India has a long history of non-alignment and kind of officially or formally saying we are neutral and we will remain neutral while it plays its international relations friendliness and bargaining and transactions with any partner or any global actor. And in these days, it's been Russia and even trade with China, regardless of the history between India and China. So in my view, those trends will continue. India will remain pretty much on the fence regarding a full-on partnership with the United States. I don't see that changing. However, the main issue, as I see it, is Indian economics. And that's going to have a lot of impact on what happens internally, politically, economically, socioculturally, and otherwise. And just to give you an idea of how bad things are going within India, I'll mention a few things because I don't know whether the Modi administration now or in the future is going to be able to successfully tackle it. So Time Magazine just had an article a month ago, and I'll mention some very shocking statistical data that came out from there, from the article. And one of the things that they say is that the outflow of people, especially jobless youth from India, looking for jobs in Russia in particular, and also Israel, they end up inadvertently being conscripted and working in conflict zones as soldiers in harm's way. So Russia is sending them to Ukraine, and Israel, of course, to fight the conflict against Hamas in Gaza, according to this article. And then the last thing I'll mention on this is the Manipur crisis has not been dealt with by the current administration. And then back to economics, the article mentions that in terms of the global hunger index, has far goods than India does, and Vietnam has less than 1/10 of India's population. So those are some ideas in terms of how poorly the Modi administration has done domestically and particularly in the Indian economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Hayat, for your comments. I would, Ambassador, would you like to say something on this point, or maybe how? And I would like you to just, your comment on this, and then how do you assess the utilization of India's abundant demographic dividend when we are looking at when our aspiration is for Viksit or developed country, India as a developed country? Please.
Thank you, Dr. Indu. As always, it's a great pleasure to be with you and with such a distinguished panel. Let us look for a second. I think many people lose the context. We are looking at a country which is the most populous country, 1.4 billion people in India. And very often the countries with very small populations tend to pass on judgments. And that's what happens, which I'll come to later, about the gray zone warfare. What the article Dr. Hayat mentioned does about the Time article, or a large number of articles that have come out, or the statements that have come out from the West, do indicate into that they are very natural. That happens very often whenever India has important elections. Now look at this. You mentioned also there are 968 million voters in India, which is out of whom 497 million are men, 471 million are women, more than 48,000 are third gender, and 18 million are 18 to 19-year-old who are the first-time voters in India. And about 8.8 million voters are disabilities, and they are voting across 1 million polling stations. No doubt it has been a very long election. About 6 phases are already over. The last phase, the 7th phase, will be on June 1st. And June 4th, we will have the election. Now, despite this length, despite the issues and the problems, be it poverty, be it unemployment, be it whatever, we have seen that in Indians hold their vote as sacrosanct. The festival of democracy in India is something that is beyond everything else. Transition of governments is a normal and a given, unlike United States, unfortunately, or many other countries. We have how many parties? 2,600 plus political parties in India, but 2 major alliances right now, NDA versus India Alliance. And we have had first elections this time after the abrogation of Article 370 in Jammu and Kashmir, that has been held successfully and smoothly. On the contrary, you see what is happening in Pakistan, in Balochistan and POK, Pakistan Occupied Kashmir. We are looking at that. So far, more than 60% people have voted as per initial estimates. The exact one will come later. Another thing which is very important about Indian elections is that this is done through electronic voting machines. And no one has seen that there is any issue with that. Now, coming to India's couple of issues, I will comment later, but then, a gray zone warfare, as you all know, being the political scientists, is something, those tactics and disinformation campaigns are a commonplace. Because 2 things, and I'm talking as an objective person out of government totally, is that when a country like India, which exercises its strategic autonomy, which does not mean neutrality, which means taking decisions like non-aligned time also, taking decisions on the basis of what is the issue, who is at fault, according to us, whether it is serving my national interest, whether it is serving global interest, bring about some sanity in the political discourse, international discourse, through dialogue, diplomacy, hankering for peace, working for peace. Those are the issues which have made India take its decisions, what it has taken. We have global comprehensive strategic partnership with the United States. And we have a special and privileged strategic partnership with Russia. China is this month, become the largest trading partner in the goods and not services. Services, the United States still remain there. And despite the fact that we have this adversarial relationship with China, which is also playing out in our southern South Asia with all our neighbors also. So China has emerged as a major factor. China and Pakistan remains adversarial to India. They believe in zero-sum game. They are using asymmetric warfare against India. That is going on there, that we are seeing. But the fact that the countries that are our supposedly close friends and strategic partners tend to intervene in the process on the basis of some kind of false reporting, very often, or false, I would say, standards that are deployed to arrive at certain conclusions, like talking about issues of human rights, talking about democracy deficits, or talking about some extrajudicial killings according to them, even if they are terrorists who are being very much allowed to prosper in their countries while they claim to uh, vouch for their anti-terror credentials. But this thing that my terrorist versus your terrorist game very much plays out there. So that's very much there. Second is that India is not only the voice of itself. It does not only look after its own interest, as the pandemic has very clearly indicated, that India went out to the world to provide vaccines and the medicines and to 150 countries, let alone our South Asian partners, including Pakistan and others. We offered everyone, including to the United States and Canada. India stands for Vasudha Kutumbakam, which means the world is one family. That is the principle it comes from. None of the other countries do so. So that is something that we have. Now, you all know that the purpose of the foreign policy is to serve your national interest as it is perceived. It is not hedging. It is not being opportunistic. It is doing the right thing, what every country tries to do. So Prime Minister Modi, as he calls this policy, as a multi-alignment and mix and match foreign policy. So this is something that is going ahead. Now, there have been a mention about the Indian diaspora, that because of the unemployment, Indians are going abroad. Now, Dr. Indu, you are aware, we have 35 million Indians working outside. Rishi Sunak happens to be first generation Indian, who is the Prime Minister of UK. All the 25 global companies, they have CEOs who are Indian origin. The Prime Minister of Ireland was an Indian. Portugal was an Indian. I'm not talking of Caribbean and other countries. I'm talking of Western Europe. So the Indians have been going all over and contributing to the growth and prosperity of all these countries. Look at West Asia today. In the Gulf countries, there are about 9.5 million Indians. They are working for the country. They are the most preferred workforce, and they are not all blue labor workers. No doubt we have unemployment. And what happens is, in this particular case, the people are going. Now, Russians have been asking India, because there is a population decline in most of these countries, especially in Russia. It used to be 140 or 142 million, and now it is hardly 135 million people there. Some of them, of course, were recruited. There are agents who get into this and they try to mislead the people and recruit them. And then once they arrive there, then they are taken to, they were supposed to do something else, and then they were deployed. So these kind of things happen everywhere. Israel also tried to recruit Indians because it thought that it could avoid the Gazans who were coming to help them and take them. But they did come here. They tried to recruit about 10, 15,000 people. But at the same time, because of the war, the Indian government issued advisories in both case of Russia as well as Israel to stop these kind of, I would say, the poor or rather malicious recruitment done by certain countries. So Indians have never been allowed in the harm's way by the Indian government. It has evacuated Indians from the conflict zones, not only India, but from many, many countries, people. I have myself evacuated people from South Asia from Libya when I was posted there in the conflict zone. So that is something that we do it. But now what we are facing, the biggest problem in India is that because India is growing, as you mentioned, Viksit Bharat by 2047, as it is the fastest growing major economy today, as Indians have the biggest human resource, it has become the biggest market today. It is trying to work as a part of the global value and supply chains. There are countries who do not like it, or they don't like a strong leader who can speak and to look into your eye and speak that. China is one such country. So it's trying to honor you into every single corner that it can. But that's not possible today. They realize that India is a pivotal country for everyone who's there wants to come into this area. And we know that economic pivot is moving towards south and is moving, and India is going to be a very major uh, partner in that. We have seen that at such time, the terror attacks, or for example, one example I'll give you from our Pakistani friends, what they did recently, only last week, when one of the leaders of the political party, which is called AAP, was talking about and giving examples and calling Prime Minister Modi as a Tanashah, the Pakistani former information minister Fawad Chaudhry started talking about this and taking advantage of it, tried to create a narrative. What did Kejriwal, who is the AAP leader, he said? He said, your country is sinking. First, you look after your country, then talk about it. We can look after ourselves. These are our internal differences, political differences, we'll manage them. So today, what we are looking at is same way the Americans or the other Western countries also come out with these kind of things. I believe that something is, how is it that your shirt is whiter than mine? I mean, that is the kind of approach that many of these countries follow. I could give umpteen number of examples, but the most important thing that we need to be clear and have a proper proactive communication strategy in India, which in my view has been lacking. And that is something that we should be able to counter these arguments proactively, not reactively. And I'll stop here. I'll be very happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. You have touched upon various issues about the China's trading partner, largest trading partner, and Pakistan, our immediate neighbor, and of course, and not having the good relations. How the comments from the Pakistani leaders, or sometimes like with the party politics, whenever there is election, so and so on. So we will take this a deeper into the QA session. Just I would like to welcome Sania's remarks here. Sania, over to you, please.
Thank you, Dr. Indu, and everybody else for their wonderful and insightful views. I think I try to look at these elections from Pakistan's perspective, trying to understand what is the pulse inside Pakistan from the leaders, from the public, on social media, what is the vibe there. And what is interesting to me this time that Indian elections was not a very big deal on Pakistani media. I can go into the depth of the reasons what it could be, but one reason which is very obvious is that I think people were expecting Prime Minister Modi to take over the third term. So it was not kind of a much surprise on Pakistani side. Regardless of this factor, how Pakistan actually envisions Indian politics is less about party politics, and it is more, I think, imbibed in the idiosyncratic factor. It's not about getting riled up with the hyper-nationalism, which is constantly seen from the BJP political campaigns. Some of the narratives, which is jingoistic, which is largely very classical, I think, style of BJP politics. And it was exhibited even this time, and it wasn't taken very seriously within the establishment circles, whether it is civilians, political leaders, or Pakistani military establishment. What is important here is that Pakistan tries to understand, I believe very much so, that India's political landscape, whether it is BJP or its Congress, the foreign policy towards Pakistan largely remains very constant. There's not much favoritism whether Pakistan wants Congress to come in power, or Pakistan believes that Rahul Gandhi would be there, so things would be different for Pakistan, or Pakistan envisions that if Modi would come into power, things would become more stringent. However, it is obvious that when BJP was there, Pakistanis still remember it was Prime Minister Vajpayee who made the historic visit and tried to make fences on both sides. And what happened after that is also history, that those agreements fell apart, and the historic visit could not make a landmark history, and then Kargil happened, and terror incidents happened. But it is important that Pakistan instead of a party. So many of the leaders within BJP have that courage to come forward out of their party politics machismo and talk about statesmanship. Vajpayee was a classic example of that. There are others too, that those people are in the politics, even on the Congress side. But if the leadership, as far as is concerned, Pakistan observes that, yeah, there are people who want those assertive foreign policy and aggressive foreign policy, not only towards Pakistan and the border, but also towards China. So these are my initial overview about how Pakistan or Pakistani Pulse has been. There were some comments that came from the leadership side. I would say briefly, 3 statements received attention in Pakistan and in social media as well, from whether they were BJP. One was obviously from Prime Minister Modi, which was about, if Pakistan is not wearing bangles, we will make them wear bangles. This statement was again seen in the light of hyper-nationalism, jingoism, something that is part of the electoral campaign, and Pakistan did not react too much, except that there was a statement from Foreign Office that these statements are not to be taken seriously. Another important was from the opposition leader, and particularly Mani Shankar Iyer, warned that the Modi government actually needs to respect nuclear armed Pakistan. So this statement received, I think, much more voice abroad, particularly in the United States, than in Pakistan, because not only that Pakistan take Mani Shankar Iyer very seriously, but the fact is that Pakistan thinks that many of those peaceful statements actually come as a doublespeak, and they don't get much value or traction within the establishments of India, because they have decided what they want to do with Pakistan. So even if, sadly, any peace or positive comment is coming from that side, it does not get very positive attraction. The third one, I think, was kind of a warning from BJP leaders, Amit Shah and Yogi Adityanath, and they emphasized that re-elected BJP governments would take actually additional steps of taking back Pakistan-administered Kashmir. So this statement was kind of taken with a pinch of salt. Not only that this is something that Pakistani circles had been expecting from Modi governments in the past, but this kind of reaffirmed if Prime Minister Modi would be taking over again, and if there is anything that he wants to do on Pakistani side, that would be messing up with the Pakistani occupied or administered Kashmir. And this did not receive much social media vibe, but it is the statement that has, I must say, touched the egos in the establishment and must be taken as a warning. As far as the comments regarding India's economy that I would really like to stress upon, I kind of agree with Professor Hayat here. I think the reason is not only that the Time magazine has actually talked about it, but BJP leaders, Subramaniam Swamy, actually mentioned about how this growth rate is stunted at the moment. According to him, it's exaggerated what India has been projecting, and Modi administration has not taken enough steps to expand it. It's not at 7%, and it's right now at 4%. So these statements, I think, are important when they're coming from the party leaders. And Subramaniam Swamy is not a leader that you can ignore, given the fact that he's an economist himself, and he reads through the lines and gives very objective observation about how the party is shaping up and what India India's political landscape is. So given the fact that India's growth rate is not going to be as astounding as it has been in the past, I very much agree that it will affect India's geopolitical influence, particularly its relationship with United States and other great powers, given the fact that obviously the strategic partnerships on the military and strategic front won't change. But there would be an impact of how India's growth rate would create problems for the current or coming leadership to stretch their leverage politically.
Thanks, Anna. You covered like the almost all the topics that were going on in this election scenarios, starting from the comment from the political leaders to the POK to the Pakistan occupied Kashmir, and the one thing that I would like to mention about the Indian politicians and the Pakistani politicians, like more a kind of when these statements are coming, sometimes I start writing of that statement, and then after 5 or 10 minutes I just leave it there, my pen. Okay, it's just a stand, it's just a political statement. So when you talked about the Subramaniam Swamy, yeah, where we know that he's a very eminent leader. He was initially he was in the Congress, and then he came in the BJP, and now like when you will see the comments on the Twitter, so it's like these comments are basically political, I guess so, from the either parts, even from the Pakistan, even from the India. And at a certain age, at the certain level, when we reach there, when our stature is becomes so high, so then we just have this kind of profession. But we want to turn it towards the researchers, how the young researchers and learners, students can take this South Asian geopolitical dimensions not on the conflictual, but how we can collaborate, how we can see is that though it's a reality, the Kashmir is reality, and the exciting is also the reality. We heard it in the elections campaigning, Kashmir, and I know Indian Foreign Minister Mr. Jaishankar, he gave the answer of one question regarding the exciting too. So these are some issues that's maybe should come on the table, and we will discuss more when we'll go into this. And now I would like to invite Dr. Zaid for his comments. Dr. Zaid, over to you, please.
So can you hear me?
Yes, you can.
Am I audible?
Yes.
And can you see the screen as well?
Yes, please.
All right. So thank you very much, Indu. Very good evening from Dhaka. It's always very rewarding to be part of any CIPR event. And I actually like the passion and the professionalism that's followed by you and your team in generating new knowledge on contemporary issues. And I'm very happy to be part of it and sharing the discussion with so many bright and brilliant minds. Before I start, I must also make a disclaimer, sort of reiterate the disclaimer, because the comments that I'm going to make is as a researcher and a reader of politics and international relations, and does not reflect the position of the universities or the organizations that I belong. So as it has been rightly said that the Indian Lok Sabha election is the world's largest democratic exercise. So India has a very long and rich history of democratic practices. People, those who have translated ancient classical Indian texts like the Kutillas Arthashastra and the sacred Hindu texts like Sukraniti, they have one conclusion, that those who wanted to see democracy as a form of government in ancient India saw it in Arthashastra or other such classical texts, just as those who saw only autocratic monarchy, one-man rule. So this was a contrasting sort of interpretation that we get from the classical Indian texts, which you can read. Some of these are from Ragaranjan, is a famous, I think, South Indian scholar who translated Kutillas Arthashastra, and also Binoy Kumar Sarkar, who translated the Shukraniti. Now, why do I say that? Because if you look at the two BJP and Congress manifesto, you sort of find a similar contrasting view. What is that? The BJP terms India as the mother of democracy. And it draws the civilizational root of India and also sort of pledges to promote democratic values all over the world. While the Congress manifesto is actually tells something different. It says the democracy in India has been hollowed out and the country is rapidly sliding to become a one-party, one-person dictatorship. And the gravest danger, according to Congress, is that India may no longer be a truly free and democratic republic. Now, this is problematic. Although there is a perceived democratic backsliding, India's foreign policy success, you cannot ignore that one. And these are visible. And what are those? There is a qualitative difference under Prime Minister Modi. India is believed to be transitioning from being a balancing power to a leading power. It is also a critically sought after geopolitical and economic actor, particularly by the West. It is a collective bargainer of the global South. And the view that India has been moving from backwater to the murky status of the global stage is not only shared by the elites, but also the masses in India. But the crux of the problem is, as I was hearing some of the comments, that all these are views, narratives. So for these views to graduate from the descriptive, impressionistic narratives to the knowledge domain, where we as academics belong, requires a systemic and evidence-based research with an Olympian detachment. And that is exactly what I try to do slightly here, using some of the data of India's voting records, the United Nations General Assembly, and also a special emergency special session. This is a widely used method by the IR scholars to assess state behavior. And I will be employing these data and showing it and how to find out where does India stands and with whom and for what purposes. But before that, we must have a look at what the two manifestos says about the foreign policy of India. The BJP manifesto is relatively specific about, it spells out 10 specific foreign policy commitments, transforming Bharat as a Vishwabandhu, which is a friend of the world, voice of the global South, elevate India as a global soft power. And it also spells out some of the ways and means of India's global aspiration, promoting India's civilization value by an expanding diplomatic network establishment, becoming a first responder, building conscientious to fight against terrorism financing, India, Middle East, Europe corridor was repeatedly mentioned in the manifesto, engaging Indian diaspora, and of course, becoming a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. In contrast, the Congress manifesto hints at reviving the Nehruvian foreign policy. And it also believes that India's position on many issues has been marked departure, and it specifically cites the Gaza incident, and it also believes that India's global image needs repaired. But at the same time, paradoxically, it also says that it will uphold the continuity of Indian foreign policy. The ways and means outlined in the Congress manifesto lacks some specificity, except for it mentions exercising strategic autonomy in thoughts and actions, and will conclude long pending trade negotiations, etc. So broadly speaking, there are a lot of convergences that strengthening and elevating India's position in the global status is one of them, like Vishwabandhu and voice of the global South. And while both the manifesto remains silent about India's positions on Russia-Ukraine war. So how do we sort of assess these things with some evidence? So this is what I have sort of a plotting of the 1,191 UN resolutions that were put to vote at the UN General Assembly and also special emergency special sessions from 2010 to 2023. As you can see, India's alignment with the global majority, which you can hypothesize that as a Vishabandhu or voice of global south, there it was supposed to be more aligned, but it has gradually declined. And it has also declined in case of China. I have just put the other two graphs as well, just to show a comparison, because a discussion of the region does not become full without taking into account the China factor. And also Bangladesh is there just because I will conclude with some small states perspective towards the end. So it shows there's around a 12.5% decline in the India's alignment with the global majority. The China's decline is much little higher. It's about 17 percentage point. And the Bangladesh decline is around 7%. So there is a very, one inference that we can draw from here is that there is a gradual decline of the norms and values by at least by these two major powers in the region to be aligned with the global majorities. And this particular is problematic, particularly for the small states, because the increasing distance of India's China from global majority puts the small states like Bangladesh, who rely on systemic stability, more vulnerable in exercising their own policy sovereignty and maintain their strategic autonomy. So this is one sort of a broad inference that we can come up from this data. But then we need to delve a little more into find out specifically which kind of norms are we talking about, because the 1,182 resolutions that I've plotted here it includes a huge number of different kinds of classifications of norms, starting from SDGs to security norms to sort of economic development and also sovereignty norms. So I have focused on the sovereignty norms, which is the most contentious issue for the countries like Global South. And if you see between 2022 to 2023, there were 6 such resolutions which were put to vote in the emergency special sessions. 2 were regarding the Palestine-Israeli issues, and the rest 4 was on Ukraine issues. In all these, the global majority on these were around 82. For the Palestine issue rose from 67% support to 82%, while the Global South majority or alignment or support for the Palestinian cause rose from, in just 3 months, just after Hamas attack, was from within 3 months. You can see the dates of these resolutions, from 80% to 86%. Ironically, India, which is a traditional supporter for Palestinian cause, abstained in one of those resolutions, which was on the Palestinian cause. And of course, subsequently it corrected in the next one. But that was misaligned with the Global South and also with the world, but aligned with some of the countries in the north. In case of Ukraine, both India and China position, India and China's position is discordant. They abstained, and this is not new. Very interestingly, it is new for China, but it is not new for India, because in 6th emergency special sessions during the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, India was the only country which did not condemn Russia, or Soviet Union at that time, for violating the sovereignty norm. Also in this time, India was the member of the Security Council as non-permanent member. They also blocked the voting to transfer from, to convene the emergency special session, meaning that this kind of state behavior sort of gives you a reflection of what they will mean for small states if they become a Security Council member. So this particular sort of trend in India's sort of global stage has some very grave implications, and also needs really serious thinking both at the domestic level and also at the in the capitals like Delhi and also other capitals around the world, because sovereignty norm is a fundamental pillar of international system. It is not policy sovereignty I'm talking about. It's a sovereignty norm when attached with the territorial integrity. And small states rely on systemic stability and are very sensitive about this norm. And any deviation from the principled position on the question of sovereignty norm contributes to the cognitive dissonance, fracturing not just the Southern solidarity that India so much wants to achieve, but also a global consensus. And such deviation reflects an anachronistic approach, in my view, to foreign policy, rooted in power politics and hegemonic desire, making the region much more insecure and shrinking the space to exercise policy sovereignty of the small states. So how does this particular thing plays out at the regional and the bilateral context? That is where we should, I want to sort of highlight three sort of examples or incidents which could sort of capture the picture of the systemic level impact at the regional and the bilateral level. The first one is, you must have noticed there was a recent visit by the Indian Foreign Secretary to Bangladesh during this ongoing general election at India, which is very unnatural. And according to one of the Indian commentator, very famous or at least celebrated, Palki Sharma, she said that there were three reasons for that visit. One was Bangladesh's decision to sort of hold a joint military exercise with China, Bangladesh's desire to avail a soft loan from China, and also China's proposal for constructing a bridge along the river Tista. All of which will sort of, in India's view, would sort of take Bangladesh away from India's orbit. It's not clear what the government how the government responded to that, or whether actually these were the actual agendas. But it actually creates a perception, as we were just saying before, that the systemic level behavior of the state. What does it tell us in the regional and the bilateral context? That it chokes countries, small countries, to exercise their policy sovereignty, if anything. And the second concern which it creates is South Asian regional security complex are discordant. It's fractured. Despite that the neighborhood first policy, there is no South Asian solidarity. Particularly evident because we haven't been able to solve the Rohingya issue, which is a key national security concern for Bangladesh. But both India and China, despite their close relation with Bangladesh, have neither resolved nor even supported Bangladesh at the United Nations, exposing the limits of the regional or South Asian solidarity. Unlike India's leading role as a collective bargainer for Global South, particularly during the G20 presidency, India, as well as China, as an aspiring global leader, has failed to provide moral support, let alone solutions for the Rohingyas. Now, this has a spillover effect, as some of you might be knowing. There are some incidents of insurgency by Kuki Chin on hill tracks, and that addressing that also require that kind of collaboration and sort of prudence. Interestingly, it is not mentioned in BJP manifesto. Only the Congress manifesto touches on the unrest in Manipur, the adjacent Indian state bordering Myanmar and Bangladesh, and it pledges that it will remove the present state government, appointing a reconciliation commission to bring about a political and administrative settlement and a final solution with the Naga groups based on their previous sort of agreements in 2012 and 2013. The third point I want to make, and I just really want you to sort of hear it out, because this came up when I was doing another research of studying the Lok Sabha debates in Indian Lok Sabha transcripts. So it happened, the strength of India-Bangladesh relation is rooted in the blood and the sacrifice made by the Indian soldiers and the people during the birth of Bangladesh in 1971. That is an established fact, period, nothing more than that. Against all odds, India, along with the then Soviet Union, helped Bangladesh independent, the only country to be born during the height of the Cold War, following an ethno-linguistic struggle. On 12th August 1971, when Sri R.K. Radhikar, who was the Union Minister for Labor and Rehabilitation, was asked in the 5th Lok Sabha election by the opposition Janata Party MP about the religious makeup of the people, those who were fleeing Bangladesh as refugees to India. This is what he replied. The refugees from East Bengal coming to India belong to all religions, faiths like Muslims, Hindus, Buddhists, Christians, etc. No separate religion or community-wise breakup is being maintained by the government. He was actually asking a list that how many Hindus, how many Muslims, and all those kind of stuff. Now, this particular statement reflects, probably best captures the secular nature of India that the collective imagination of Bangladeshi people have, which I'm afraid to say that it's probably no more, or we are far away from there at this point. Why? Because instruments like NRC, CAA, Hindutva doctrine, RSS has successfully accommodated the Muslim population of India, assigning them a hyphenated identity and still win elections. Now, this backlash of assertively implementing the instruments like this, NRC and CAA, is destined to affect India-Bangladesh's relations, if not at the government level, at least at the societal level. So what does it tells us to the final thought? I do not want to end with the pessimism, because India's general election actually, although it's strongly predicted to be won by BJP, offers an opportunity to revitalize South Asian solidarity. And why I say that? Because BJP as a party has the wherewithals like no other party in the history of India to do something that it truly wants to do. And only if it can integrate the vibrant civil society of Indian civil society, as some of the name came in. Of course, I've seen Subramaniam Sami's podcast, the very sort of flamboyant podcast. So those are some of those are, of course, rhetorics, but there is a repository of wisdom, sophistication, and innovation in the Indian society, which actually can steer its direction to become a Vishabandhu, dispensing the old-fashioned power politics, sphere of influence rooted in this realist school of thought. And for the new government in Delhi, the much-deserved rise of India needs to be anchored not as a consequence of the major powers' rivalry, but on an enlightened interest to strengthen regional solidarity, inclusiveness, and above all, as the Ambassador Anil was saying, Vasavati Kutumbaram, betterment of humanity. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jai. That's a fascinating presentation that you mentioned a lot of points from South Asian solidarity to the South Asian, to the regional security architecture. I guess let me take some questions, and then we will open the discussion for our audience if they have any questions. Let me start with Ambassador on this South Asian solidarity or regional security architecture. We are just hoping the Prime Minister Modi's third term, and what's your comments on the revival of the SAARC organization, that we don't see any progress on this SAARC, and again the issues that talked about Rohingya issues and the Manipur, because we also have the problem in Indian northeastern state due to all these influx and all these and you know that what India is doing, progressing, despite of the critics, either from the east or west, India has been doing very well on the economic front. And would you like to say something on that economic aspect, that what you would suggest in Indian government or our audience, that how India will be the third largest economy hopefully in the 2027 that is predicted. So I would like to take your comments, and then we'll move to the Dr. Hayat. Please, Ambassador.
Thank you. And firstly, I would like to compliment Dr. Zaid for a very, very detailed study and the presentation that he made. The only thing that I perhaps would disagree to some extent is the word used as hegemonic aspirations of India in the region. I think that is far from the truth, because if you were to look at even at the neighborhood first policy, it is by very essence is a policy which is non-reciprocal, providing access to everyone. But what has happened over time is that our neighbors have also, and this is my personal view, it's nothing to do with the government's view, are also playing the same game, that they want to pitch their advantages or national interests, so to say, both leveraging China and India in the region. So if you were to look at India's direct relationship with China, it is adversarial. There's no doubt about it. It has in it will have a problem. And I always say that China is going to be our challenge in every geography. So that's the bottom line as far as I'm concerned. But at the same time, for our neighbors, the basic premise that India begins with is that we want a strong neighborhood because that is good for us, including for Pakistan. India has never wanted to undermine Pakistan, but it is the terrorism that has been used as an instrument of foreign policy against India for last 40 years is something that no country can really work with and have. That's why we say terror and talks cannot continue. It was mentioned that about SARC. Now in 2014, when Prime Minister Modi took over, if you remember, he invited all the leaders from the neighborhood, including the Pakistani Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif of the time. He was there. Prime Minister Modi, I know, also out of the box. He was in Afghanistan, and suddenly then he had a talk with Nawaz Sharif, and he said, "How can you fly over and go to India without visiting me?" So he dropped there. It was not in his program. He went there. It was unconventional. But every time that India has tried to have normalizing relations, despite the terrorism as a policy, there is another terror attack. You see the history. It is not from now. Every time there is a move, there is a deep state in Pakistan which tries to dislodge it. So the fact is that SARC, which is a Bangladesh initiative by President Ziaur Rahman in 1985, and I have served in Bangladesh for 3 years, from 86 to 89. So, and I have seen during President Shah's time that how the relationship panned out. And he is one person who always talked about Das Koti Manush, forgetting totally about the 2 crore Hindus who were there in the country. So we are looking at that kind of a situation. But I have always felt that between India and Bangladesh, apart from whatever political relationship we have, there is a cultural affinity. That goes beyond the political and this. So P2P connect between India and Bangladesh is very different. And so is for all the people in all the countries in South Asia. And that's the strength of India, I think, that to revive that, to generate more confidence in these countries, that India is not, because they suffer from big brother syndrome. And that's quite natural also. Now, whatever my experience has been in foreign service with our neighbors and with others, is that what India did, since the SARC, at a time when it was to be held in Pakistan, SARC summit, the only thing, and no country in the region really wanted to support terrorism in any way. And Pakistan was not willing to desist from it. And therefore, India said that what is the point in continuing? But I tell you, about 15 days ago, we had the Secretary General of SARC, who is a former foreign secretary from Bangladesh. He was here, and we had hosted him, and we had a discussion with him. What he said was, India is the country which is contributing the most for SARC projects. And that projects and all the support continues for SARC. There are several, during the pandemic, if you remember, Prime Minister Modi called all the health ministers, tried to talk to them, tried to provide assistance to all these countries, whatever they needed in that time. So it is not that we are not there in the process, but at the same time, the only thing that a country needs, and country like India, needs is that whatever assistance we are giving or capacity building we are providing to our friends in the neighborhood, and they get the largest amount of India's assistance, the least one expects is that they will not allow their land or territory to be used against India's core interests. That's the only minimum requirement, and that's it. And when it happens, compared to with our friends, the Chinese, who are trying to undermine India, try to keep it within the South Asian complex only constraint, I think that becomes an issue. The voting pattern was also talked about. Now, one of the in which you said India abstained, or in one of the issues even voted against. You see, the terrorism is something that has always defined our policy. So when anywhere there is a terror act takes place, we know how it feels. We have seen the United States itself did not recognize terrorism until 9/11 happened. It's only after that they started talking about terrorism, and even today they are talking about my terrorist versus your terrorist. So in that kind of a situation, a country which suffered for 40 years from terrorism continues to do so. Then obviously wherever it happens, you have to take that approach and take the decision as far as your UN Security Council vote is concerned. Now, just a little bit on Russia. It has been explained by the foreign minister and everybody else. The fact remains is that you may have a myopic memory, and two wrongs may not make it right. But look at this, just 20 years history. How many times we have seen the unilateral interventions which have destabilized the whole of Middle East? And who has done it? You manufacture evidence, go and invade a country, and then you expect that India should be standing with you in condemning a country. India has not endorsed Russia's invasion. It has only held a same view that there should be UN Charter should be respected. It has clearly said the territorial integrity of a country mentioned. Now, whose territorial integrity are we talking about? We are talking about Ukraine's territorial integrity, not that of Russia. But Russia's security concerns this is not the topic today, were different and need to be appreciated. That was not there. What happened in NATO, our friends from the US already know it very well, that how NATO continues to expand. So there is between Russia and China, Russia and US, there is a different dynamic, geopolitical dynamic that is playing out. But what is India doing? Prime Minister Modi told President Putin in Samarkand at the SCO summit, he said, this is not an era of war. And that's important. Now, when the West started pressuring Gulf countries to supply more oil to European countries, we were left with little option. We have to look after, we depend on 70, 80%. And therefore, India went to Russia, and Russia offered a discounted. So we have to look at our national interest as well. And not only that, look at this hypocrisy. Whatever we are getting from Russia, I don't know everybody knows or not, we have today become the largest supplier of diesel to United States and Europe. This is processed in India and supplied back to the US. Now, these are the facts that they need to be known before we make out a policy judgment about this. So we are not supporting Russia in its war. We are not supporting this, but at the same time, by simple condemnation, what have we done? Now, look at another thing. What is happening in Israel and Hamas? What are we looking at there? There, the country is, they are having very different views. You continue to support the UN Security Council resolution, you're using the veto. So when the behavior of these superpowers, so-called superpowers, concerned, they are behaving in an identical manner. We are looking at growing at a pace so that we can provide for our 1.4 billion people and for the global south. Now, a disjunct may appear sometimes to be, but India has consistently been a voice of the global south. Now, Rohingya crisis is definitely a very sensitive issue as far as Bangladesh is concerned. And India has its own approach to it, which has been explained to try to provide assistance to Bangladesh, whatever is physically required, because we know that what happens. There was a reference to CAA and NRC and all that. Now, there is a way it does not mean that it is discarding everybody. We have had many Muslims who have become the citizens from coming from these countries as well. But at the same time, it is taking into account the minorities in the neighborhood who seem persecuted and wanted to come to India. So this was just to facilitate them their entry into India to become a legal citizenship in India. That's the one purpose. It has still not been implemented in India, even after there is a discussion going on in the country. So secular India, of course, but the current government has a different view about the secularism by itself, what kind of a secularism it is. But the thing is that I personally have a great faith and hope in India's diversity and its unity in diversity. They are India's strength, and everybody understands that. Hindus might be in majority in the country, but this is the only country where you have all kinds of Muslims and minorities taking over the highest posts in the country, elected posts. The security posts, the chief of army staff, navy staff, you can find anywhere, even intelligence. So I think that it is very easy to pick up a small cherry picking of small facts and just trying to justify a narrative. And that is precisely the issue. India is committed to our neighborhood fully, including to Pakistan's welfare. And I tell you one thing, this is my view. I have not consulted anybody in Delhi, but I think that if anybody can improve relationship with Pakistan, this could be only under Prime Minister Modi if he comes back. Manipur, it's a very unfortunate scene what's happening there. And like everybody else, I think that we have not been able to handle it very properly.
Thank you, Ambassador. Now I would like to invite Dr. Hayat for her comments, and I also want her to say a few suggestions, though we know that US-India partnership is like the comprehensive strategic partnership, and how do you see that doing more deeply engaged with the US in the Indo-Pacific? What's your comment and suggestions on that? Dr. Hayat, please.
I first want to thank the ambassador for qualifying some of my earlier comments. So thank you for going deeper into that and giving context. So US-India partnership, look, I'll be brief on that. The main concern I have is if there is a conflict between US and China, what role would India play? What position would India have on that? I would be interested to hear the ambassador's position and opinions on that as well, because as an American and someone who teaches in a military college, I'm very interested in, and we often are concerned about that issue, because it looks like we're baby stepping our way into some sort of friction, tension, maybe even military conflict with China, especially maybe over Taiwan. So in terms of political rhetoric, that's heating up between US and China, but there's a lot of gray area regarding whether or not we're going to walk ourselves into a US-China conflict, which hopefully will not happen, but could happen. So that's one aspect of that. But a couple of things I'd like to mention also. We all have observations of political leaders globally, but particularly since I do Middle East and South Asia, from those regions that political leaders hate looking in the mirror and love to do the blame game and deflect away from domestic problems, issues, dilemmas, crises, and say, oh, this is just Western media and propaganda and Western opportunism to make us look bad. or each other, India, Pakistan, media, and how they play games regarding the blame game and suspicions and distrust and deflecting away from internal domestic problems and realities on the ground. The one thing I will say is I fully embrace what the ambassador said about India's pride in diversity. However, unfortunately, the current administration is playing politics on deepening identity politics rather than working on solidarity internally. And because of the interconnectivity within the region, even with adversaries like India, Pakistan, there's that connectivity, geopolitical connectivity. It's going to have an impact. And unfortunately, and Pakistan plays the same games as well, it's not going to have a positive impact on regional solidarity if those deepening identity politics trends continue. So that's one aspect. The last comment I'll make is about Russia. Russia's invasion of Ukraine is on the pretext of NATO expansion. That's not the reality. The reality is that Russia/Putin wants to recreate and resurge a Soviet empire by, number one, erasing Ukrainian identity. Folks, that's genocide. When you want to erase an identity of a people and the existence of a state and its sovereignty, that is genocide. And Putin is on an arrest warrant with the ICC for forced removal of Ukrainian children. And I'm sure that list is going to get longer in terms of his war crimes and genocidal acts in Ukraine. It is based on evidence of his own speeches and the circle around him in Russian leadership. They want to erase Ukrainian identity. If India has the conscience of the global South and also the principles of universal human rights, then it cannot abstain on that crime, on voting against that crime. It's black and white. There's no other kind of gray area around that. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hayat, for your comments. And now we are just running out of time, so I would like to invite Sanya for her comments. And I also want Sanya to recommend at least two things that how in the next government, when India sworn in with the next government, how India and Pakistan can at least reduce the tension, or at least can make some room for dialogue. And your suggestions for the Pakistani government, I guess so, that would be helpful.
Thank you. Yeah, so circling back to what is the situation right now. So as much as I am a deterrence pessimist, I am a peace believer. So I do want that the relations should go in a positive direction, regardless of the sticky points that have been there for decades. Because that's what policy and diplomacy is. If you're not doing it the right way, then insanity is repeating the same thing over and over. So I think there is a chance. It depends on how the personalities, again, that I strongly believe through the history, that they can play an important role. And why I'm thinking it that way is because, again, as the ambassador also pointed out, Prime Minister Modi made a historic visit, and a quick stopover at Nawaz Sharif's residence in 2015. Now, what happened after that is another thing, but yes, I do commend Prime Minister Modi's courageous and bold move to go above and beyond and make a stopover and show that there is a possibility that they can take the steps in his political leverage. Right now, we have, again, Sharif government in power. So there is a chance that Sharif family is there, and Prime Minister Modi is again coming to power. If there is a possibility that they can just start over with some of the things that have been buried in the past, there is a great possibility for both governments to do that. The other thing that is in Sharif's favor right now is that Pakistan's current army chief seemingly have good ties with the Sharif family, which was not the case in 2015. As far as civil military relations in Pakistani side goes, it's definitely the military that called the shots. But if the Prime Minister of Pakistan is the one who had leverage in promoting the army chief to the current position that he is in, it seems like that he has some kind of good he has a hand in glove that he can actually talk to him about how they can move forward. Also, that it is in Pakistan's interest to have good relations with India, giving India's increasingly leadership role emerging in the world stage. So that's one thing that I strongly believe there is a strong chance, and both governments should leverage that chance and should not miss this opportunity which is coming our way. Now, the important sticking point right now is that if we start over from where we are today, the biggest thing that Ambassador rightly pointed out was how much India is willing to let go of, if Pakistan is willing, or take that statement seriously from the government, that Pakistan is willing to not sponsor any terrorism on Indian side, not let its soil be used by any terrorist safe havens. That is the ball in the court of Indian government. What is in Pakistan's side, sticky point is if India could reverse the abrogation of Article 370, which stripped off Jammu and Kashmir's unilateral the right of autonomy. Again, India does not seem to have undo that, because that was the powerful initiative taken by Modi government. If it was something that India never wanted to do that, definitely they wouldn't have done it. So it is very hard on one side how India and Pakistan can negotiate what is the level playing field that they can sit across the table and talk and resume the dialogue. But likewise, as it is important for Pakistan not to be increasingly isolated diplomatically on the world stage, it is, I think, very crucial that the governments on both sides understand the severity of this moment and international politics and come to the table and resume dialogue.
Thank you, Simran. So now the last comment from Dr. Jahid. Dr. Jahid, over to you, please.
Right. Thank you very much. I think I'll just clear up a couple of things that came up during the discussions. First, yes, I am a constructivist. So hegemonic, the term hegemony is less used by the constructivist, or actually not used. So, but certainly there is an element of desire to have a sphere of influence, which sort of slightly corresponds to the same thought process. The reason I say that, because as I was giving one example of the recent visit during the election itself by the Indian Foreign Secretary, which is perceived as sort of creating a pressure on policy sovereignty of Bangladesh. So that being said, I do agree that, as Ambassador Anil was saying, that Modi ji has the habit of thinking out of the box, and he actually can do things which many other leaders haven't been able to do for quite a long time. So that is why I was just suggesting towards the end that what could be an enlightened interest of India towards its neighbor, towards inclusive sort of participations, not only by onboarding and strengthening the global South solidarity, but also a regional solidarity on key issues. There is another point, I think, which I slightly disagree with the Hayat, and I don't know whether if Paul Rexton Khan is still working in Naval War College. He used to be my teacher when I was in Air Command Staff College. I heard he moved to Naval War College, but never had a chat with him. On the issue of US view about the Ukraine war, when I was talking about the cognitive dissonance, I was not only that comes when powerful countries do not respect certain fundamental norms, like sovereignty norms, and show respect to that, is not only applicable for China and India, it is also applicable for Russia, it is also applicable for USA, those who have violated this one. So as a small state, one has to understand that The biggest stake for systemic stability is for the small states. They are the perfect reform agent for holding the systemic stability. So unless the powerful state understands that and sort of values that particular thing, the rule-based order or systemic stability will not work, because this is the cognitive dissonance. By encouraging power politics, you actually make more regional powers would sort of vote or take advantage of each other's rivalry. So this is what I was saying. Regarding the UN resolutions, I was actually, the data that I've drawn is about, it's not, it's from around 13 years data and 1,182 resolutions, specifically on the Palestine issues, as the ambassador was saying, because each resolution comes with the sort of a meeting, minutes of the meeting. So as I was reading what on which point India has sort of diverged, this was exceptional divergence from the Palestinian cause. India was actually supporting a Canadian proposal, draft proposal, as opposed to the Jordanian proposal, which actually eventually got passed with 80% support from the global south and around 72% support from the whole world, which stuck me because traditionally India, Jordan are much more closer than given the history with Canada. So India was in this case supporting something which, and it was her voting was discordant not only with the global south but also with the BRICS countries and the whole world itself. So, but then it quickly corrected. Just after 3 months, a similar sort of resolution was placed in December 2023, and that was in which India came back to its normal fold of supporting the Palestinian cause and that resolution and condemning Israel. And subsequently, of course, recently, as you know, they have also supported the creation of an independent state for Palestine in the General Assembly voting. So with those things in mind, coming to the last point, as Indu was hinting, that what could sort of bring about a much more resilient, prosperous, and cohesive South Asia. I think the strength is there, the will is there, the knowledge is there, cultural affinity is there. It's only that, and in some cases, the leaders are also there. In some cases, the leaders are also there. What it needs is sort of galvanizing, not government-to-government interest transactions. Most of the South Asian countries are doing that. It should be people to people, more concentrated on conscientious building between the people, so that when an Indian match, cricket match happens here, the supporters are more from their side, which is not a government control sort of thing, as opposed to any other side, if that is an indicator of how this gets done. So that cultural affinity, cultural closeness, and as I said, okay, she's back, I think.
Well, Dr. Hayat, you asked a question about what will be India's stand. There are two things we need to have a look at it. That India, number one, does not subscribe to the idea of an alliance. You see, there's a difference between alliance and the alignment. There are two things. Now, we have to not go very far again, and I'm not going to go into the history because, see, there are no permanent enemies or friends, as we know. What happened in 1971, that you brought your supported Pakistan and China fully in that war against against India. The Soviet Union came and helped us. But given the current status of our relationship, there are a few things that I would like to tell you specifically in the Indo-Pacific. There is as I had mentioned in the beginning, and I subscribe to this, that we believe in competition with cooperation as far as China is concerned. But China has adopted a third policy of conflict. And that is something that is going to play out. Right now, as you know, on the borders, we have about 50,000 troops eyeball to eyeball with China since 2020. They're there. We are still discussing, negotiating, meeting, talking all the time with the Chinese. We work together in the BRICS, we work together in the RIC and the SCO and everywhere else. At the same time, our relationship with the United States is perhaps at its best today, I would say, especially in the defense and security domain. We have signed all these foundational agreements, LEMOA, BASIC, and all those. Now, they definitely provide what? Number one is, in the Indian Ocean, India is a resident power. There is no denying the fact. As far as I have spoken to several of your defense colleagues from the US, they do not expect India to come up and start fighting in the maritime domain for them. As long as India can handle the Indian Ocean dimension of it, that will be good enough for them. Secondly, they expect that with the agreements that we have signed within that, the kind of servicing and support to be provided to the ships from the US that will be participating in it. And I think that we have done the agreement, so that should not be a problem. So to that extent, I think if it happens, hopefully it will never happen. We don't know, but now after the Russia-Ukraine war, Israel-Hamas war, I think the warmongering should reduce. But at the same time, we don't know how the China will eventually behave with Taiwan and whether the US will come to its rescue fully. And I have seen in several war games also that. But one thing I can tell you is that as far as India-US relationship is going in both defense security, despite a lot of semantics that we keep hearing from various sources and your media and others trying to berate India. And you mentioned about that we try to cloud over some of the weaknesses of the country by saying that they are criticizing us just for the heck of it. The fact remains is, how would you say that India is put below Pakistan as far as democracy quotient is concerned? Or for that matter, various other, you put us below Afghanistan in the VDAM and other indexes. So that is something that shows itself that how erroneous, or I would say they are not reality based, and they have a different objective altogether. But anyway, we will not go, but to answer the question, this is what is going to be India's position as of today.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ambassador. And it's such a brilliant discussion, and with the diverse perspective, and we manage it very well. And we are hoping that Dr. Jahid is saying people-to-people connection, that we already have initiated this, and hopefully we'll see in the next Modi term. Hopefully we see that South Asian countries, they come closer. They will start the dialogue and will improve the relations. And this is like we passed 30 minutes and we didn't realize that the discussion is going. It was so intriguing. And thank you very much again, Dr. Hayat, Ambassador. A very insightful discussion. Dr. Jahid's fascinating presentation, and Sania, always balanced, balancing way how your approach and your talks. So it's such a nice discussion, and we will post it on the video and our website and the social media. Thank you so much again.
Thank you so much, Dr. Indu, for having us. And it's always a pleasure to share a panel with esteemed scholars. And thank you again for the opportunity. It was wonderful.
I echo that. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.